There is a strange loneliness that creeps into the mind of the intelligent person. You feel it when you speak, and no one truly listens. You feel it when you notice what others ignore, when you sense the absurdity of things most people take for granted. It is the silence after you share a thought that goes too deep, the awkward smile from someone who thinks you are overcomplicating something simple. It is the slow realization that clarity is not always a blessing. Sometimes it is a curse. You walk through the world noticing contradictions. People claim to value truth, yet they run from it the moment it disrupts their comfort. They idolize freedom, yet willingly chain themselves to systems, jobs, and routines that suffocate them. They say they want wisdom, but secretly crave ignorance, because ignorance soothes while wisdom burns. If you are intelligent, you see this everywhere, and the more you see it, the more alien you feel. Why is it that intelligence so often isolates rather than connects? Why does awareness create distance rather than belonging? Why do those who see the most deeply often feel the most misunderstood? This paradox has haunted thinkers across centuries. Socrates was condemned for corrupting the youth, not because he was wrong, but because he asked questions that others were too afraid to face. Nietzsche wrote of the loneliness of the higher man, who walks a path the masses cannot follow. Jung described the process of individuation as a painful journey into solitude, where one must separate from collective illusions to discover the true self. You may recognize it in your own life. Perhaps you learned early that your questions irritated teachers or parents. Perhaps you discovered that your curiosity made friends uncomfortable because they preferred easy answers. Perhaps you noticed how in conversations people talk in circles, repeating cliches, while you carry a weight they cannot even perceive. Over time, you learned to stay quiet, to observe instead of speak, to let others live in their comfortable fictions, while you quietly wrestle with truths too sharp for ordinary dialogue. And yet, a question presses in your mind. Is intelligence truly a gift, or is it a hidden exile? Is being awake to the contradictions of the world a form of liberation, or is it a prison built out of awareness? The intelligent person often feels like an outsider, not because they wish to be apart, but because they cannot help but notice what others refuse to see. It is not superiority. It is sensitivity. It is not arrogance. It is vision. And vision is often unbearable in a world that thrives on blindness. So here lies the great question. If you are intelligent enough to see through the illusions of society, what are you supposed to do with that vision? Do you silence yourself and pretend not to notice? Do you rebel and risk being cast out as a fool or a heretic? Or do you find a way to live in between, a stranger among the crowd, always inside but never fully at home? This question is not merely intellectual, it is existential. It determines not only how you live, but how you bear the weight of knowing. And it demands an answer, because silence will not suffice. The stage is set. To understand why intelligent people feel like outsiders, we must descend deeper into the hidden forces that shape the very way society treats intelligence and the way intelligence perceives itself. If the intelligent person feels like an outsider, it is not simply because of personal quirks or bad luck in relationships. The problem runs deeper. It is woven into the psychological architecture of the human being and into the cultural fabric of society itself. To see why, you must first understand a simple but uncomfortable truth. Most people do not want reality. They want comfort. Arthur Schopenhauer once observed that the majority of people are not capable of thinking, but only of believing. To think is to suffer. To think is to pierce the veil of appearances and risk discovering that the ground beneath you is fragile. Most people recoil from that abyss. They do not want to question whether their values are hollow, whether their leaders are corrupt, whether their traditions are illusions. They want stories, tidy, reassuring stories that tell them life has meaning, that their suffering is justified, that tomorrow will resemble today. Intelligence, by its very nature, disrupts these stories. It asks too many questions. It refuses to look away. It finds cracks in the narratives that others depend upon. This is not malice. It is simply what a sharper mind does. But to those who cling to illusions, intelligence feels like a threat. And so the intelligent person is pushed to the margins, not because of hatred, but because of fear. Carl Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Yet he also warned that individuation, the process of separating from the collective, requires suffering. It demands that you leave behind the comforting embrace of the herd. The herd resents this. The herd wants conformity, because conformity ensures survival. From an evolutionary standpoint, the human animal has always depended on the tribe. To deviate from the group was once to invite death. Even now, though our world has changed, our psychology has not. Society still demands sameness, and intelligence, if it does not bend, becomes difference incarnate. This is why intelligent people often feel torn between two impossible choices: dilute themselves to fit in, or remain authentic and endure solitude. It is a dilemma older than philosophy itself. Socrates drank poison rather than silence his questioning spirit. Giordano Bruno was burned for daring to suggest an infinite universe. Countless others lived not as celebrated geniuses, but as exiles in their own time. But the root of the problem is not only social, it is also internal. Intelligence can turn against itself. The same mind that perceives the illusions of society also perceives its own illusions. You see through others, but also through yourself. You notice your own contradictions, your own hypocrisies, your own fragility. You realize that your intellect is not a shield, but a mirror that reflects your nakedness more clearly. This self-awareness, while a gift, can become unbearable. Nietzsche captured this tension when he wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Without that why, the intelligent mind risks spiraling into despair." And here lies the deeper paradox. The more intelligent you are, the harder it is to believe in simple stories. Yet without stories, life itself becomes unbearable. You are caught between clarity and comfort, between truth and survival. Intelligence does not free you. It chains you to a new kind of exile, an exile of meaning. Society reinforces this exile through its institutions. Schools reward obedience more than originality. Workplaces prize efficiency over wisdom. Politics thrives on slogans, not nuance. Popular culture celebrates spectacle, not substance. The intelligent person, immersed in such a world, constantly feels misaligned. Your pace is too fast, your depth too heavy, your questions too sharp. And so you are asked, subtly or directly, to tone it down. But toning it down feels like betrayal. Betrayal of the mind, betrayal of the self. So you withdraw. And the more you withdraw, the stranger you appear. Others sense your distance, but cannot name its cause. They call you aloof, arrogant, difficult, when in truth, you are only trying to preserve your integrity in a world that punishes depth. The roots of this problem, then, are both ancient and modern. They lie in the herd instincts of humanity, in the psychological defenses against pain, in the cultural machinery that prizes conformity over truth. If you are intelligent, you do not simply think differently. You live differently. And that difference is enough to place you outside the invisible walls of belonging. Yet if this is the hidden problem, then a more unsettling question arises. What are the consequences of this exile? What does it do to the soul of the intelligent person to live perpetually on the edges of society? And what does it do to the world when its sharpest minds are silenced, ignored, or turned inward against themselves? The problem is no longer just personal. It is civilizational. And to face it, we must descend further, into the unseen consequences. When intelligence is exiled, when vision is treated as disruption rather than guidance, the consequences ripple far beyond the individual. They seep into the foundations of society itself. What begins as one person feeling alienated soon becomes an entire civilization, quietly sabotaging its own potential. The first consequence is silence. Intelligent people learn quickly that their insights are unwelcome in most spaces. They notice eyes glazing over when they speak, the subtle defensiveness when they point out contradictions, the impatience when they raise difficult questions. Over time, they fall quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they realize their words fall on barren soil. What could have been wisdom becomes inner monologue. What could have been shared becomes buried. Humanity loses the guidance of its keenest observers, not through force, but through neglect. The second consequence is self-alienation. To exist in a world that constantly misunderstands you is to constantly doubt yourself. You begin to wonder, am I wrong for seeing what I see? Am I broken for not belonging? This doubt corrodes identity. Some intelligent people try to mask their difference by playing roles, wearing masks, adopting the language of the crowd. But this mimicry drains them. They laugh at jokes that do not amuse them, nod at ideas they secretly find absurd, suppress questions that burn inside them. The result is not belonging, but hollow performance. Their inner world contracts, becoming a private exile even within the body. The third consequence is resentment. When the intelligent person suppresses themselves long enough, a quiet bitterness takes root. They look at the world with contempt, convinced that stupidity rules, that mediocrity is rewarded, that truth has no place. Some retreat into cynicism, mocking the very people they once longed to connect with. Others grow arrogant, mistaking isolation for superiority. But beneath both reactions lies the same wound, the ache of a mind that wanted to contribute, but was never given space to be heard. And there is yet another consequence, subtler but far more dangerous, the erosion of collective wisdom. When intelligent people silence themselves, when they withdraw or grow bitter, the culture itself grows dimmer. Societies thrive when their visionaries are integrated, when uncomfortable truths are faced, when deeper questions are allowed to reshape institutions. But when intelligence is treated as threat, societies drift into complacency. They substitute shallow entertainment for reflection, propaganda for truth, efficiency for meaning. In such a world, everything appears functional on the surface, but underneath, the very soul of the culture begins to decay. You can see this decay in the glorification of distraction. People scroll endlessly, consuming fragments of content designed not to enlighten, but to pacify. You can see it in politics, reduced to sound bites, in education, reduced to memorization, in conversations, reduced to noise. The intelligent person sees through this shallowness, and in seeing, feels more estranged than ever. From a psychological perspective, this estrangement also reshapes the self. Neurologists have found that chronic social isolation alters brain chemistry, increasing cortisol, weakening immune responses, and deepening susceptibility to depression. When intelligent people are cut off not by geography, but by understanding, surrounded by people yet perpetually alone, their very biology suffers. Their intelligence, which could have been nourishment, becomes poison turned inward. But perhaps the most devastating consequence is this: the world loses its balance between vision and action. The masses often supply energy, persistence, and collective will. The intelligent supply direction, reflection, and meaning. Without integration, these two forces split. The masses march forward, but without reflection, they march blindly. The intelligent retreat into solitude, but without influence, their clarity rots unused. Together, this division leads not to progress, but to stagnation. History offers examples. When Socrates was silenced, Athens lost not just a man, but a conscience. When prophets were mocked or ignored, civilizations wandered into cycles of decadence and collapse. When visionaries like Nietzsche were dismissed in their time, societies stumbled into crises they had warned against. Every exile of intelligence plants seeds of decay in the soil of culture. And though the decay may take years to show, it always arrives. You may feel this in your own life, not only as isolation, but as a gnawing sense that something larger is being wasted, that the conversations people obsess over are shallow, that the problems they fight about are symptoms, not causes, that the whole world runs on autopilot while ignoring the deeper sickness. This awareness is part of the consequence, to see not only your own exile, but the exile of wisdom itself. And so, the intelligent person lives in a double bind. If they speak, they risk rejection. If they remain silent, they betray themselves. If they conform, they erode their integrity. If they resist, they are condemned to solitude. The world punishes them either way, and the cost is carried not only by the individual, but by all of humanity. This is the unseen weight. Intelligence turned into exile, exile turned into silence, silence turned into cultural decay. And yet, in this darkness, another possibility glimmers. For if alienation is the price of clarity, then perhaps rebellion is its necessity. The question is no longer why intelligent people feel like outsiders, but how they might live as outsiders without being destroyed by it. And here begins the turning point, the rebellion. If alienation is the price of intelligence, then rebellion is its answer. But rebellion here does not mean rage, nor violent defiance, nor the shallow performance of being different for the sake of attention. True rebellion is deeper, quieter, and far more dangerous. It is the refusal to betray your vision, even when the world dismisses it. To rebel as an intelligent person is first to reclaim the right to your own perception. Society will tempt you to doubt yourself, to dilute yourself, to pretend that what you see is not real. But rebellion begins when you decide, I will trust my eyes, even if they see what others cannot. I will honor my thoughts, even if they unsettle the crowd. This is not arrogance, it is integrity. Without this inner rebellion, you are condemned to live as a ghost in your own life. The second form of rebellion is to create your own language. Jung once said that loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. If the common tongue does not carry the weight of your vision, then you must forge a new one. Poets do this with metaphor, philosophers with paradox, artists with image, mystics with silence. When ordinary speech feels too small, rebellion is to invent a way of speaking that matches the depth of what you carry. Consider Nietzsche, who abandoned conventional philosophy for aphorisms, fragments, and mythic imagery. His words still burn because he refused to squeeze fire into the container of polite discourse. Or think of Kierkegaard, who wrote under multiple pseudonyms, crafting entire voices to express the complexity of his thought. Their rebellion was not in shouting louder. It was in shaping language itself until it could carry what they saw. But rebellion cannot stop at self-expression. It must also reach outward. The third form of rebellion is to find your true kin, not the shallow companions who only echo cliches, but those rare souls who also hunger for depth. They may be few, but they exist, scattered across time and space like stars in a dark sky. To find them is to remember you are not alone, and to find them, you must be willing to remain visible in your difference. The herd will misunderstand you, but the few who recognize your signal will become your companions in exile. The fourth form of rebellion is perhaps the most radical, to transform solitude into strength. Sartre once wrote, "If you are lonely when you're alone, you are in bad company." The intelligent outsider must learn to inhabit solitude as a sacred space, not as punishment. It is here that clarity sharpens, that creativity deepens, that identity stabilizes. What the world calls exile can become sanctuary if you choose to use it. Solitude does not need to be emptiness. It can be a forge. And yet, rebellion does not mean abandoning society entirely. To reject all connection is not strength, but bitterness. The true rebellion is paradoxical, to live within the world, but not of it. To walk among others without surrendering to their illusions. To speak with them without silencing your truth. To work inside their systems without letting those systems erase your integrity. This balance is not easy, but it is possible. It is the path of the outsider who remains human. History again offers examples. Viktor Frankl, imprisoned in a concentration camp, refused to surrender the belief that life retained meaning, even in suffering. His rebellion was not physical escape, but the refusal to let brutality define his inner world. Dostoevsky, sentenced to death, and then spared at the last moment, wrote stories that revealed the abyss of the human soul, because he had looked into it himself. Their rebellion was survival without self-betrayal, expression without compromise, vision without surrender. There is also a practical dimension to this rebellion. Create instead of consume. The world tries to drown the intelligent mind in noise, endless streams of shallow entertainment, outrage, and distraction. To rebel is to step away from passive consumption and pour your energy into creation. Write, build, design, reflect, craft, anything that takes your inner vision and gives it form. Creation is the most powerful antidote to alienation because it transforms pain into offering, solitude into contribution. Finally, rebellion demands courage. It demands that you carry the weight of being misunderstood without allowing it to harden into contempt. That you endure rejection without folding into conformity. That you let exile carve depth into you rather than emptiness. Courage here does not roar. It whispers, "I will not betray myself, even if the world never applauds." This rebellion does not erase alienation, but it transforms it. Instead of exile being a cage, it becomes a frontier. Instead of silence being suppression, it becomes refinement. Instead of loneliness being decay, it becomes the soil from which something rare and beautiful can grow. The rebellion of the intelligent person is not against the world, but for the world. It is the stubborn insistence that clarity matters, that truth has value, that depth is not a curse, but a necessity. And if enough outsiders choose this rebellion, not in arrogance, but in quiet strength, then perhaps exile itself can become a hidden brotherhood, a fellowship of those who see what others ignore. But rebellion, though powerful, is not the end. Beyond rebellion lies something deeper, a final truth that reconciles alienation with belonging, clarity with comfort, solitude with meaning. And that truth is what we now must uncover. If rebellion is the way to survive exile, then the ultimate truth is the way to transcend it. The paradox of intelligence in a world that resists depth is not something to be solved, but something to be lived. And the final realization is this: being an outsider is not a curse. It is a calling. The loneliness of intelligence feels unbearable only when you mistake it for failure, when you believe that not belonging means something is wrong with you. But what if your very exile is proof of your task? What if your distance from the herd is not punishment, but responsibility? Nietzsche wrote of the Übermensch, the one who creates new values when the old ones collapse. Jung spoke of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming the whole self, even when it means breaking from the collective. Sartre spoke of radical freedom, that each human being must choose meaning in a universe that offers none. All of these visions point toward the same truth. The outsider is not simply rejected by society. The outsider is the one tasked with carrying vision forward when society refuses to see. You feel like a stranger because you are meant to stand at the threshold between what is and what could be. You are meant to see what others cannot, and to suffer that sight, not because it makes you superior, but because it prepares you to give something back. Your alienation is not wasted. It is the forge where your contribution is shaped. But here is the shift. You are not meant to wait for the world's validation. If you keep seeking belonging in the places that exile you, you will remain wounded forever. The ultimate truth is that belonging for the intelligent person does not come from the crowd. It comes from alignment with yourself, with truth, with the pulse of reality itself. When you align with this, you belong even in solitude. Consider the sky at night. Each star shines alone, yet together they form constellations, patterns invisible to themselves, but undeniable to anyone who looks up. So too with intelligent outsiders. You may burn alone, but you are part of a constellation of minds across time. Socrates, Hypatia, Nietzsche, Frankl, countless others, who also burned in solitude. Seen together, they do not represent exile, but guidance. They form the secret map of humanity's becoming. The ultimate truth, then, is that your task is not to erase your outsider status, but to embody it with courage, to let your difference become a signal rather than a wound, to understand that the world will not always accept depth, but that does not diminish its necessity. If anything, it makes it more vital. For in every age, it is the few who carried vision against the tide who shift history. This realization also reshapes how you see others. The world may seem full of stupidity, but stupidity is often nothing more than fear. Fear of pain, fear of change, fear of the unknown. To see this is to stop despising the crowd and to start understanding it. Their blindness is not malice, it is self-preservation. And once you understand this, compassion softens contempt. You no longer need to hate the world for not seeing. You can simply keep seeing and keep offering, knowing that even if only a few understand, those few may be enough. And so, the exile becomes paradoxically free, no longer waiting for permission to exist, no longer begging for belonging in shallow spaces, no longer mistaking solitude for failure. Instead, you walk your path with a quiet certainty that your vision matters, even if it is never applauded, that your truth has weight, even if it is never popular, that your depth has meaning, even if it is never understood. The final realization is this: you are not an outsider because you are broken. You are an outsider because you are needed. And when you live from this truth, exile becomes less of a wound and more of a crown. You carry it not with shame, but with dignity. You walk among the crowd not to be absorbed into it, but to light a flame within it. And if most ignore that flame, it does not matter. For one person may see it, and that one may change everything. This is the gift hidden inside the curse. To be intelligent in a world that resists intelligence is to suffer exile, yes, but it is also to become a guardian of vision, to stand as proof that not everyone is blind, not everyone is asleep, not everyone is content with illusions. You are the reminder that humanity still has depth. And so, when you feel the loneliness return, remember this: you are not alone in being alone. You are part of the constellation. You are part of the lineage of outsiders who carried light through darkness. And the world, though it may not admit it, depends on people like you. Carry your exile as your task. Carry it as your truth. Carry it as your offering. For you are not broken. You are the proof that even in a world that resists wisdom, wisdom still survives.